She went to law school just to get her brother out of prison, and it took her 18 years to prove he was innocent. Her brother, Kenneth Waters, was convicted of murder based on weak testimony and inconsistent witnesses. Even though he insisted he was innocent, no one believed him. The system just kept rolling on. His life hit pause, sentenced to life in prison for a crime he didn't commit. She is Betty Ann Waters, a waitress with no degree, no money, and no support system, raising 2 kids all by herself. But she made a decision that nobody around her understood, to become a lawyer. It was a choice driven by deep desperation. Kenny, her brother, had tried to take his own life in prison. In that moment of vulnerability, he made a request that would change both of their lives. Betty Ann, if you go back to school and become my lawyer, I know you'll get me out of here. No matter how long it takes. She promised she would if he promised never to try again. She started from square one. She juggled studying with working, faced judgment, exhaustion, and pressure. It wasn't just about passing exams, it was about holding on to a hope that no one else believed in. Just imagine the weight of that. Waking up every single day knowing your brother's life depends on you passing law exams, on you getting to grips with a system that had already let him down. She, who grew up in a family labeled as wild and unruly in a small town in Massachusetts, where the police were always around, now found herself deep in the very system that had failed her brother. Years went by. While her brother aged behind bars, losing the best years of his life, she accumulated knowledge, rejected motions, closed doors. She had to sacrifice her marriage, her time with her children, her youth. The exhaustion wasn't just physical, it was soul deep. She recalls checking her brother's time cards from the diner, where he worked evidence that would have proven his alibi, only to discover the police had ignored them at trial. It was insane, she remembers. False testimonies from ex-girlfriends who recanted and then reversed again only deepened the sense of helplessness. But she didn't stop. After nearly 2 decades pushing the same case, she found a box of evidence everyone said had been destroyed. With the help of the Innocence Project, she gained access to DNA testing that had never been done at the time of the crime. And there it was, undeniable, scientific. He wasn't the culprit. The DNA didn't match. 18 years later, he walked free. Not because the system worked, but because someone refused to give up. Because someone decided his truth mattered more than the world's disbelief. This story isn't just about the justice system. It's about the architecture of human resilience. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and creator of logotherapy, wrote in his book Man's Search for Meaning, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Betty Ann had her why. Frankl teaches us that suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning. Betty Ann's pain was transformed into fuel. And neuroscience explains exactly what happens in the brain of someone who refuses to quit. When you sustain active hope, not the passive kind that sits and waits, but the kind that acts, your brain enters a state of focused neuroplasticity. Dopamine, the reward neurotransmitter, isn't released only when you reach the final goal, but at every small step toward it. Every exam Betty Ann passed, every document she read, her brain reinforced the neural pathways of persistence. Neuroscience shows us that resilience is not a personality trait you're born with. It's a muscle you train. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and decision-making, is constantly activated, strengthening your ability to stay focused on long-term goals, even in the face of adversity. And the hardest training of all is continuing to believe in something, when there's no external evidence to support your belief. There's a part of your life you've tried to prove so many times, that now you don't even talk about it anymore. You've explained it, tried to show it, tried to make it work, and still, you feel stuck in a version of yourself that isn't really you. Maybe it's a project no one supports, a career change everyone thinks is crazy, or an inner healing that no one can see happening. The most exhausting part isn't even other people being wrong. It's having to carry alone a truth that no one else can see. It's knowing who you are, but not being able to live it in practice. It's being in a calm environment, but your body won't follow because your mind is at war trying to prove your worth. And little by little, you start to give up the fight, not because you stop believing, but because you're tired of not being seen. You get tired of being the only person in the room who believes in your own innocence and your own capability. But there's something this story shows without saying it outright. Not everything that seems final is over. Sometimes your freedom doesn't depend on convincing the world. It depends on you stopping the abandonment of what you already know to be true. There's a passage in the Bible, Galatians 6:9, that says, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not give up." Betty Ann's harvest took 18 years. The due time is not our time. Impatience is the enemy of truth. When you carry a silent trot, the world will try to convince you that you're wrong simply because it's taking too long. But truth doesn't expire. Your essence doesn't fade just because others haven't recognized it yet. There are truths within you that don't need applause. They need the courage to keep existing even when no one validates them. Don't abandon your truth just because the world isn't ready for it yet. Your freedom begins the moment you decide to be your own advocate.